Bless Online's story is set with two factions locked at war with each other for ultimate rule over the world they live in. The Hieron controls the northern lands and the south is under the Union's dominion. When you join the game, you'll choose which of these two factions to be a part of. Every character you make is gonna be in the faction you choose, so if you plan to play with friends, make sure you're all coordinating where to go. Think of it like choosing between Horde and Alliance in World of Warcraft. The only real major differences are the landscapes you'll be playing in for the first few days of the game, and the races you can play, which have their own set of lore and starting zones. There's a total of 8 playable races and 10 classes to choose from. There's no gender lock in this game, but the race you choose determines what class you can play. The Guardian is the main tank class. They have attacks focused mainly on getting in front of a target and keeping its attention. The Paladin is the tanky shielded healer. They use magic fused into their clubs to attack. Their damage is on the lower end since they focus more on supporting their parties with buffs and heals, and on defensive gameplay. The Archer class is, as you would imagine, an archer from most other games. They use traps and mobility to outmaneuver their enemies and snipe them from afar. My highest character is actually a ranger, so I'll be showing that in action throughout the video. The Assassin class has both short range and mid-range attacking capabilities, with stealth in its arsenal to make the most of first encounters. The Mage class controls fire, ice, and wind as its core elements. They mix their spells with these forces of nature to land devastating amounts of damage. The Berserker swings a two-handed axe dealing massive AoE damage. Mystic is another support class summoning nature spirits to deal long-range damage and heal allies. There is also the Warlock class, which hasn't been released yet, but from what we can gather, it's gonna have demonic summonings and likely will be a DOT and debuff heavy type of class. Each class has 3 core skills to match changes in your playstyle. For example, the Archer can switch to a stance that benefits traps and attacks with casting to deal more damage, or go with a stance that increases movement speed. There's a very clear limit on what skills can be used at any time. You can only use 8 active skills, 4 passive skills, and 2 reaction skills at any given time. Personally, I really like this because it means that even though you're fighting the same class, it doesn't necessarily mean they're better than you just because they have better gear. You can be better built for 1v1 or whatever situation you're in. The game's character creation lets you customize a lot, with sliders for pretty much every part of the body. It's not anywhere near the level of Black Desert, but the designs are similar in terms of proportions and how you design your character. The game doesn't really allow terribly misshapen bodies like in Blade and Soul or Revelation. There are quite a bit of basic character creation features it's missing for me to call it a good character creator, like saving character templates and putting in RGB values for hair and eye colors. Like most MMOs, questing is the main way to progress your character. To level up, you'll follow the important main story questline and do side quests along the way. One thing I can say about the main story though is that Bless has one of the most entertaining and visually appealing storyline of all MMOs I've played. The plot of the story is complex, but it's not hard to follow. I can't say I can recall any other MMO that really entertained me with its story to the same extent that Bless did. Each race starts in their own racial area and follow their own equally graphic-rich story up until reaching the capital cities. The game continues to be very story-driven after that, with awesome cinematics involving politics, betrayals, and the war between the two factions. I also want to note that there are small bits of adult content thrown into the main story, so take that as you will. The actual world itself is very open, with architectures that are well designed on the outside and on the inside. You can fly and walk to virtually anywhere you can see, as true open world games should be. For me, I found myself exploring quite a bit, since there's benefits to going far away from the safety of my faction's lands. Sneaking into enemy territory and finding the best route for gathering locations and taming locations is one of the thrilling parts of this game. At least for me, it felt like I was part of the world, playing my role as a faction member infiltrating the opposing faction. To top it all off, there's really no convenient way of teleporting around great distances. If you want to go somewhere, you pay a dragon tamer to give you a ride there, get on airships, or traverse the land yourself on a mount or on foot. And you gotta do all this in real time like old school MMOs. Some can say that it's inconvenient or time consuming, but for me, I like it this way because it gives me a chance to explore and actually discover things in the world. The game is huge, and even as someone who's been playing for months, I'm still far from exploring its entirety, but that's what I like about it the most. One of the things you'll encounter early on is taming. As you progress throughout the game and travel around, you'll tame a whole bunch of pets for buffs, mounts, and servants to send for gathering or assassination. The majority of enemies in the open world are more or less available to tame. If you want a more detailed look at taming, I have a video linked in the description. Crafting, taming, and gearing up take a huge part of gameplay, but they're all fairly simple and easy to understand since the focus of the game is really somewhere else. Besides the open world, there are also instance dungeons that, from my experience, tend to be really straightforward. Go from boss to boss, killing everything in your path, sometimes unlocking doors and disabling traps along the way. They're usually on the simple side, but that doesn't always mean they're easy. Coordination and good gears are still very much needed to actually beat them. At endgame, there are also raids for world bosses, but I can't say much about it since I haven't actually experienced it in my time playing. The first PvP you'll encounter is likely gonna be open world PvP. The main questline actually leads you to areas where you will cross paths with members of the opposing faction. A bit like in Arcade when you're introduced to areas like Hasla and Halcyona. What's good is that attacking other players is rewarded and encouraged, so it's actually quite common. There are also instance PvP arenas for both small-scale and large-scale fights with leaderboards and ranking systems. On top of that, there's realm versus realm PvP that allow top participating guilds to occupy castles, giving them control and tax earnings of lands in the world. As for cosmetics, there's not a whole lot of it in the game, but I did find some on the Korean main website. I like that the fashion items tend to be more tame and more or less fit in the theme of the world. While there are fancy dresses and bunny outfits available, you'll find that armors and clothes that fit the game world are far more abundant. The game's English version for North America and Europe is due to launch sometime this year under Aeria Games with updated combat and more features. While I feel the PvE is missing something to keep me challenged and interested, the way it's tied with the open world PvP gives enough desire for me to continue progressing. The leveling was entertaining, which if you think about it is a feat in itself, since that's something not too common in MMOs these days. Do I recommend the game? Yes. But I recommend it primarily to those that want to have a good time going through a game's story and is interested mostly in PvP throughout your progression and at the end of it. I'm gonna be playing this game and covering it for quite a bit, so if you want to stay up to date with Bless, do consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.